and that has gone into this program. It's great to see the success of it for your students. Just
Yeah.
to clarify, you did you demoed there two uses, right? So one was again for employees, is that correct? That was the first
Yes.
part.
Yes.
And again, who's the audience then in the second one there?
So the second one, where we work with youth groups and guidance counsellors, so we piloted with actually deaf schools here in the region that wouldn't have a high percentage of the students wouldn't have gone on to higher education. So we kind of targeted, particular schools, and our model worked with the guidance counsellors, and we worked with youth group officers because they were using this program, with the tools and the support of this. So that was the kind of model that we developed. And I also just want to say, Trudy and James are absolutely fantastic. And, especially Trudy, because, I've been kind of working with Strengths for a good while now, and she's been fantastic in terms of that support. So when you said, Michael, and I know the team that's here online that helped with this, putting this together, but it didn't take as long as we thought it would be. And I think that was just from the good supports that we got as well, from Trudy and the team.
Excellent, excellent. So I just wanted to clarify that, and it's amazing how that there are two audiences that it works so well with, and I love the little videos; they're fantastic. Just and then just to clarify for myself, because I see there's one or two questions coming in there. Where was that hosted? The second one there now. Where's that hosted online?
So we have that in My Career Path now, and as you know, it's not an open platform. So when we're working with the groups, they then will get the link to access the particular program.
And that's hosted on an ATU platform. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay, good. Just to clarify, yeah. I saw a question there. It was around mentors. Yeah. So a question from Patsy. How many mentors do you have to work with the students? And how does that work? Because you call them strengths advisors, career guidance mentors.
Yeah. Career and Learning Pathway Advisors. So we have 3 Career Learning Pathway Advisors on our program, but also we worked with AHECS. So for example, in ATU Galway, we work with Kirsten. So she did her accreditation. Actually, Sally is here as well. Sally, really, she delivers out on the online employability module. And we've also integrated the strengths profile into that. So we work kind of with other kind of groups that will have accreditation and that link into this, so that we're not just confined to our own team. We also work across the university.
Excellent. So those mentors then, it's an important criteria for them then to have the training done to use the tool.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Uh, I think that was the only question there. I noticed as well you use a tool, a final question from me, called, I think, the Abintegro tool. Is that correct?
Yes, so that's the platform, Michael, that you would have seen there from My Career Path. So we use Abintegro, and that's fantastic, because I know you also have that in UCD, and we've customized it, obviously, for our use, because obviously we link to the recognition of prior learning, and there are different areas that we focus on kind of in our pathway models, because recognition of prior learning, as you know, is kind of a complex process, and we have to kind of inbuilt that into the whole program as well. But yeah, we use that Abintegro, which is very useful, for how we want to present, because there's also good resources. There's a bank of resources there that help people, when they're home at night and they're bored or whatever, they can go back in and refer to some of these supports of articles or little videos to help them understand what it's saying to them as well, in their own time.
And I see you leverage as well the inbuilt the program there, the Career Edge Plus. So
Yes,
this forms part of that as well.
yes, yeah, definitely.
How many students do you find on average that would finish out the Career Edge Plus then? Do you get a high rate of completions?
We do actually, and I think because they are mentored through this process, and very
Right.
often, as you know, with mature learners or lifelong learners, they're kind of motivated, to do this, and that's why they come to this service, because maybe they're at a point where they really want to kind of be very proactive in terms of their future career. So they're probably coming from a different, perspective, because they're very highly motivated to do it.
Yeah, but I appreciate the mentoring there. The coaching is crucial in
Absolutely. Yeah. And just one final point, because I know I'm
mm,
taking up John's time, but when we started doing the strengths profile, we actually did it on campus and it was fantastic. But then, as I say, COVID came. So ideally, it's like a lot of these things. If you can do it in person, it's great. And we would involved other undergraduates as part of this program. And we had a big team involved in the whole kind of delivery. But we're finding it with online, definitely in terms of how we're working at the moment, really suits people because they're working full time. They have very limited time on their hands to do these things. So we've had to try and have it as interactive as possible in an online environment.
fantastic. Yes, certainly leading the way, Bridie. We do use it here in UCD, but your level of sophistication there now is something I would aspire that our own service would get to at some point in the future. So we will be knocking on your door again, Bridie, at some point. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
that.
Ewan. Thank you.
And I think we're just right on time. So we're moving into so as people may have noticed, this session is a longer session today. It's an hour and a half, and I'm delighted to see John has joined us. I'll pass back perhaps to James so he can do the introductions to John, and again, looking at the use of strengths from another angle entirely. So thank you very much, Bridie, and passing back to James.
Thanks, Brady. So no pressure, John, to follow that. But thanks a million, Michael. I want to I'll let John introduce himself. John Byrne from Manchester Metropolitan University, and also one of my colleagues called Abby Parker has also joined the call, and Abby works from the Capfinity side very closely with John as well. So I'm hoping that between the two of them, they can bring to life what John has done with the MMU programs. So John, I'll hand across to you.
Thanks very much. If you don't mind, I'm just going to be a second because Abby's just texted me and she needs the link resent.
For the meeting itself?
Yeah.
I can do that. Yeah, I'll do that.
Fab. Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes, so I am I'm a program leader at Manchester Metropolitan University's Business School, and I lead one of the country's biggest programs, business management here, which has approximately 1,700 students on it, and it's a full-time undergraduate program. My background is in degree apprenticeships. I used to teach post-experienced students, so it's a shift to teach pre-experienced students. I took on the leadership of this program because I like a challenge. I later found out that courage and adventure are two of my main strengths, and I took it on at a point where we were launching a new version of the program in 2020. So that was the big thing that happened in 2020. I'm sure none of you remember anything else that happened in that year. And part of that was, can I share some slides? Yeah, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. You should have accessed there, John.
Yeah, thanks very much. Make sure I share the right screen. Sorry, there we go. Okay. So yeah, so part of that was a new architecture within the course, which at the time we all thought was good, best in class practice for career development and professional development, because we embedded professional development units at every level of study. And this was in the design of the course before we got to strengths. Ignore the bit about personal tutoring because that came in later. So as we prepared to launch the new program, I was invited to a meeting with Abby, who's, I'm happy to say, has joined us now, and she introduced us to the strengths profile. And you know, at the time, I remember being a bit skeptical, not because of the profile itself, but there was a lot going on that year, as you can probably imagine. But it soon became apparent that tool, that approach, could actually underpin all the rest of this. So we already had a great idea and a great design. We have a wonderful careers service here at Manchester Met, who we work very closely with. I think they've just won a national award as one of the top careers services in the UK. We had lots and lots of the right ingredients. What we didn't have, I think, at the time, until we came to strengths, was the thing that tied it all together. And so that was the adaptation. That was the adoption of strengths-based approach. And lots that I heard in Bridie's previous piece actually resonated with me. The approach is very, very similar to what we've taken on. So we decided that we would train our personal tutors as strengths coaches, accredit them as strengths coaches, and that we would give each student an opportunity to complete a strength profile. One of the things we noticed with pre-experienced students, in particular, is a certain, I don't know how familiar everyone is with the strength profile itself, but there's a tendency, and it's a good thing because it gives us ground to work on, for things like their realized strengths to be things that they've developed in the course of their upbringing, their everyday lives. Perhaps service, there might be a carer or something, human narrator, those kind of strengths, whereas it tends to be that the unrealized strengths are the ones that they're more likely to develop in the course of a professional environment or role. So that helps us to think about how they might develop. This is a real student, by the way. I'll come back to them in just a moment. So taking what we had previously, we then integrated strengths into our first year PPD unit, launched for the first time, and made it a focal point of the first year that they identify and begin to articulate their strengths and their unrealized strengths in a professional environment. So they also set up, for example, LinkedIn profiles and so on. Getting them to talk about their strengths also starts to embed that self-knowledge in their own profiles, and it helps them to set smart objectives as well in terms of the co-curricular activities that they choose to take on, because they have to create smart objectives and activities as part of that unit, and they base those on their unrealized strengths. So just to give you an example, sorry, I left the Turnitin thing on, which it's not plagiarism, it's just actually submitted it previously. So this is the same student as that strengths profile based on her unrealized strengths. She's going to focus on creativity, and she's going to take part in what we call RISE activities, which is how we brand our co-curricular offer, which are going to develop her creativity. I think there's one on product innovation, and she's also going to look at LinkedIn learning to understand that product innovation. Now, that all sounds quite basic, but what I like about it is that underneath all of that, what Strengths has done, it's really created a sense of what professional development is. You know, we use the term a lot around students and others, but do they really understand it? But the idea that if I take something that's in one box and I do it and I use it and I put it into practice, it might move into another box, and that might develop my professional profile, is a really, really simple yet really effective way of understanding what professional development is all about. And the other part of it that I really like, and I've mentioned this several times to Trudy and Abby, is that when you deal with first years in particular, that they're a bit reluctant to do any of this kind of self-insight stuff. You know, they don't really like it, feel uncomfortable talking about themselves sometimes. This does the work for them. And the reaction that you get from the students is often, you know, that they're really pleased with the results or surprised. We get them to reflect on their feelings when they saw the profile. Many of them feel happy, validated, comes through a lot, and then surprised with things that they hadn't really thought of about themselves, which again become part of that developmental action plan. So in doing this, they become very conversant in their strengths, so that they can then start to put those strengths into action as part of their recruitment processes, which is where we then move to in the second year, and we put them through a sort of whole recruitment process. They have to identify roles based on their strengths. They have to articulate their authentic self through their strengths, and they have to conduct, for example, an online virtual interview as well as a full assessment centre experience. And that really does prepare them really well for many of my students going through a placement application during their second year, or indeed in their ready to apply for their graduate roles in their final year. And I won't bore you with stats, but I can show you the effect of that in a moment. So the assessment centre exercise, this was designed with Capfinity through 4 different strength-based approaches. Now, I decided, having designed it for online delivery, I decided to adapt it and move it back into real world. This was part of coming back to campus, essentially. So this year at the Science and Engineering Museum. Getting them off campus, getting them out of their comfort zone was something that employers used to tell me I should do more, or we all need to do more. So it was a great opportunity to send 500 students and another 500 from another department off campus. We surrounded them with real employers, real recruiters who were there to recruit them. They were there essentially to cherry pick that day. It wasn't part of their recruitment process, but after each session, they would, connect with students that they were interested in, and those connections have really paid dividends. Interestingly, I just noticed this just in front of me, the name tags, Ellen there. One of our students had an online interview with Bentley after this experience, and it was the day that Trudy and Abby were on campus with us, and she had to talk about something from her course. She chose to talk about her strengths, and she got the placement job, and that's Ellen there, who that happens to be. What we've noticed is that I think strengths has given our students a real advantage. They, on paper, as a cohort, we have a few characteristics that would see us thought of as disadvantages. For example, 50% of our students are first generation, 35% are from BME backgrounds, and 50% of students are from the lowest household incomes. So we've got some things that we're trying to address in the background. But what I think Strengths is doing is it's showing students not what's holding them back, but what can make them great. And they get that, and they build confidence not by looking at others and thinking, I wish I was more like that, but in who they are and what their strengths are. So confidence people used to say, oh, the problem with our students is they're not confident. I don't understand what confidence means in that respect. You can build confidence in who you are and what your strengths are, rather than thinking of it as a trait that you either have or you don't have. And I think these are those feelings of happiness that I mentioned when they do the strengths profile, as well as as well as validation and so on. So they build confidence in their character. So when they're asked about themselves, they're able to give much more authentic responses to employers. And I think employers pick up on this, because I'm showing off a little bit with this list, but this is a really impressive list of placements that have been secured by those students who've been on that journey. And this 5 years ago, some of these would have been on it, but by no means all of them. There's a lot more SMEs, by the way, that we work with, but to be hitting some of these really big brand names, highly competitive roles, is really testament to what's happened. And then we go all the way through. So at level 6, we put them into, we already designed professional practice units, which is basically consultancy, that kind of stuff. And alongside that, we give them a PDR. So the idea is, the architecture of the course is that they identify their strengths in the first year. In the second year, they apply for the job using the strengths insight. In the final year, they're on the job. They're using strengths for things like group formation, for example, because they have to work in groups. So who has which strengths, who's going to do what? That's something they've historically been very poor at, but now with Strengths Insight, they can identify, you know, the right people for the right roles. And we have a strength-based PDR as personal tutors with each student, which has been really interesting this year. I've had some really lovely conversations where I've used strengths coaching. For example, a student had an offer from a banking sector, and the other was from the energy sector, and they couldn't really decide. They were very similar offers, so we had a strengths coaching session and made, you know, put some clear blue water between the two offers, and she was very happy with what we were able to, what she was able to decide on in the end. So that's kind of another way of looking at that architecture. So it builds. Sorry, John, each year.
Just to interrupt there, could you perhaps explain what a PDR is for the
Oh,
audience?
sorry, yes, professional development review. So yes, so equivalent that we would have. In fact, one of the things that I've pointed out many times in my faculty is we're not using strengths for PDR when we probably should be, but the students have their professional development review meeting. It means they have to meet with their personal tutor because all of this is embedded. So it has that benefit as well of enhancing personal tutoring. The personal tutors are accredited to coach, and so all of this is highly embedded. Some of the things we've had to do, I think, are adapt our approach. So a lot of the level 4 and the level 5 is all delivered in class. So we have to find activities and find ways of delivering strengths coaching that is group based. So we use things like the strengths cards that we have. We have lots of interactive activities. Students coach each other in terms of finding opportunities on their strengths. We use strengths to mix the students up. So one of the things that's very important on our horizons at the moment is making sure that students are encountering students from other cultures. So we use strengths as a way of helping them to leave the comfort zone of their particular groups and so on. And then we use strengths in quite a practical way as well. This is an example of a CV profile using strengths. This is a second year student now. Actually, I've framed it as a first year student because I was showing it to my first years, but for the sake of this, the student is actually a second year. Okay, so she's got this mission about finding an internship. And immediately you've got, I take pride in everything I do, meaning I always work to the highest standards. So there's strength plus example, and she's showing that on her degree. I'm also resilient, highly organized, which I demonstrate in balancing my job. I'm energized by innovation. And you can hopefully see even the language here is upper level to what most CVs are probably going to have, which is I'm hardworking and motivated and, you know, interested in the world of business and all that. This is a really lovely integration of Strengths Insight with kind of professional profile and development attached to it. I think that may be the last slide. So in terms of impact, as I say, really good results in terms of increase in things like placement numbers. We've seen a massive spike this year, one that I hadn't noticed until I was being interviewed about my programme by the Deputy Vice Chancellor, in our career readiness for our level 6 students who started this programme back in 2020. There are about 13% more have said they're ready to apply going into level 6 for that graduate role than they had historically, and that had been quite a tough one to shift. So there's been a real spike there. So we're hoping that obviously the impacts for things like careers are quite very longitudinal, over a very long period of time. So we're hoping to see that sort of start to mirror in terms of actual graduate outcomes as well. So I'm open to questions as if anyone has any. Sure, my time, I think I probably was a little bit fast, but there we go.
Thanks a million for that, John. Just before we open it to questions, really great insights, and perhaps Abby, if you want to maybe add, I suppose, your perspective on what MMU have done and what they're doing, especially because you've seen how MMU compare to maybe some other major campuses across the UK in particular.
Yeah, thanks, James, and thanks, John. Always a pleasure to hear you talking about how you're developing things. And I think that's one of the reasons that we work together well in partnership, in the fact that, like you've described, we give you a foundation, we give you a mechanism, and then you can make it your own, and you absolutely have made it your own. I think one thing to point out to the audience here is that historically, you know, we know it's always very difficult for to see fairness when it comes to support that career services are given. So the fact that Manchester Metropolitan University took an overnight decision, literally it was an overnight decision in the middle of COVID, that they were going to make this part of the curriculum for everybody, to give everybody the chance, is one of, to me, the standout reasons why this has been so successful. It's become a common language, and as part of that, it's enabled this great cohesion of working between faculty and the career service, because the career service have so many great opportunities that a first year student on day one is just not thinking about. Well, because they do strengths profile in induction, literally, they already are starting to think about themselves as individuals and starting to personalize their own thinking in connection with employability and careers. And to me, that's been phenomenal. I sat on one of the sessions facilitated by the personal tutors in the university, and the electricity from the students was just magical. You know, they were seeing parts of themselves they'd never seen before, and given that validation, and to see it was certainly, when I went that day, probably one of the highlights of my year, John, in terms of the effort that was made. You know, I think, John, I think we've got about 85 accredited lecturers, something like that now. So we've got a real body that is making a difference, and that language, as we say, is seeping out into other activities, and we're seeing the positivity, we're seeing the real power of strengths. That's all I'd like to say, and what an amazing job John has done in spearheading across the university. It takes somebody with commitment, dedication, and I see that, as you know, John, on LinkedIn, you support every single student who puts their strengths out there on LinkedIn, and I love that. So yeah, back over to the team, the panel.
So Michael, I hand the reins back to you, just if you want to.
Sure.
Any questions you have yourself or from across the group?
Very good. So thank you so much, John. This is my second opportunity to speak to you. So again, very impressive. And I guess the most impressive part from my perspective is how you managed to bring everybody on board, and you have it, you know, embedded right across all of the activities. And you know, and congratulations on that success. It's a fantastic achievement. Quick question from me then. Actually, no. Let me go back here. We looked at question from Donna. Do all the students at Manchester complete this strengths program on a yearly basis, or is it just a one-off? I suppose that's the question. A one-off at the start of the year, year one.
Actually, it's a bit of both. We're experimenting with both, whether or not it's necessary. It's good from an evidential point of view if they can complete subsequent profiles, but effectively, once they're building up that awareness, I think of their profile, they almost don't need to go back to it, because they kind of know what they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. They're dealing with themselves at that point, and they're taking ownership of it. So 3 years in, I'm undecided on best course of action for that, but I see benefits to doing it. But also, I think the students themselves are equipped enough by that time with self-knowledge that they can move forward with that as a point of reference in the background. Very much in a way it is for me. I mean, I'm sure since I took a strengths profile, things will have shifted. But I still know it's there, and I'm aware of it, and I can work with it. I haven't done one since 2020, by the way, but it's still very much a live point of reference.
Very good. Is there any examples where it is being taken at a second stage later on, maybe after, just to, in a sense, to try and gauge where change might have occurred? Is there an attempt to measure that?
I think, Abby, we had
Abby?
our pilot program last year with the second years, if you recall.
Yeah, are you talking about learn and gain? Is that what we're
Yeah,
yes.
the question? Yeah. So what we've done is we've looked at some data in connection with behind the scenes. We can see the strengths and where how they compare against the general population, and how they compare against the student population, and how they compare against from one year to the next, where there has been change. We can look at that in terms of where that's happening. I think that it's something we can do. It's very interesting because I had an identical conversation yesterday with a university in the UK where they were saying we need to prove learn and gain. And, you know, what we're measuring and where we're measuring it is a very important point. I think to be thinking about this, what we need to be measuring is what's already being measured in connection with career confidence, because that's what we're tapping into here, and we're tapping into personal development. And John won't say this, but you know, when we piloted the first strengths, his course had the highest personal development score across the whole of the university by a country mile, and that was partly to do with this new approach and the dedication of John and the members of his team. So yes, we are measuring, but I think we need to be careful as individuals. Really, we have a responsibility to say that we're not doing this to measure something and prove that it works, because there are other ways we can measure it in terms of, as John said, the successful placements, etc. So yes, we can do it. The bigger question is, do we want to do it, and why do we want to do it?
That's a great question there.
One of the impacts that that we have seen, because it's easily accessed, and it relates to what Abby was talking about there, is our students' engagement with our careers centre and our careers service. So as soon as we started to use strengths, just picking up on Abby's point, that really spiked. So in a particular week, I can remember in 2020, 2/3 of the hits on our careers centre were students from my programme who were on the strengths programme, because we were linking the activities in the careers centre with the strengths profile development and their professional development, and that's really, you know, we talk about the student experience a lot. There are some fantastic resources, events, platforms that careers services provide, and anything we can do to direct students to use them, not only, you know, helps their employability and all these other things, it actually is part of a great student experience, because it's doing lots and lots of these different activities that are quite memorable. So it's very helpful in that respect as well. That just that very basic point of the understanding that students have of the relationship between doing stuff and developing is fundamental to that.
In a positive aspect as well, John. So, you know, in the past, people would think, well, if I go to the career service, I've got a bit of a problem that I need to fix. Whereas this is very much around, actually, I'm taking ownership, I'm taking accountability for being my best self, and these are the actions that I need to take. So it's a much more positive dialogue between everybody then, and it's just been absolutely wonderful to see that, because, like we say, it's not until it's too late that people realise the great resources that career services have, and that driving footfall has been incredible.
Very good. And just a question there from Aisling, and then going back to the tutor question. So we've established that the tutors are accredited.
Yes, personal tutors are accredited. That then led us to including them and involving them in the personal development unit, and indeed maintaining, where possible, that their connection to that particular group of students through their journey. Obviously, you know, most have really welcomed that. There's a few, you know, this is an extra thing to do and all the rest of it, but then we try and work out who is you know, who is the most committed to it, And then alongside that, we've worked with the career service so that the careers advisors who are advising these cohorts of students, so it's mainly business school students. We've got about 5,000 now who have taken a strengths profile. So those careers advisors are also accredited, have done the strengths accreditation, so they can talk the same language essentially as the tutors and the students. So it's a great example of that strong relationship we have with our careers service.
Yeah, it's great to see that, as I said already, you know, that I suppose right across all of the stakeholders, that integration of the process. And just clarify maybe for me there, who are the tutors then? Who are they? Academics? Are they? Yeah. Who are they?
Academic tutors. They're lecturers and researchers who also have responsibility for personal tutoring. And there's a whole other subject there about personal tutoring. I don't think I've ever been in a university that hasn't got a pilot about, you know, how do we use personal tutoring. What this does for my personal tutors and others in the business school, it gives them a very distinct sense of what they can do in terms of the career part of we see personal tutoring as career and course and community, and the career part is the part that they're not necessarily, they may not, you know, they may have been in university all their lives and done a PhD, they might not be that well versed actually with what it takes to get through the corporate door. They can research it, but you know, not, I mean, we have a lot of practitioners as well, don't get me wrong, but this gives them the tools they need to support students in their development, and that accreditation you know, it just underpins that.
And just to check, and you know, in a kind of connected way, is this for credit?
Yes. It's part of an accredited unit. Yeah. It's not the only part of it. The units existed before strengths. Strengths is just has tied an approach together for it. So for example, I'm just reading my first year portfolios. One of them is a reflective Gibbs cycle on taking their strengths profile and where that leads in terms of their action plans going forward. So they have to also use reflective language and all those other elements. We have used it in unaccredited contexts with our postgrads because we haven't got vehicle units there, and there's been a similar level of take up, so there's similar enthusiasm. They're not doing it against their will. Let's put it that way. That it really does. It's really affirming for our students. And like I say, most of them, nearly all of them, feel really happy once they've taken it because it really gives them a good sense of self and a strong sense of who they can be as well.
Very good. And just checking now as we come up to the end of our session. Wonderful session here today.
There's something about percentages in terms of assessment.
Yeah, the assessment of technical.
It's not. It doesn't sit on its own. It underpins everything. So the assessment is for personal and professional development, and really strengths insights should cut across all of that for those students. Incidentally, we're also using it in other contexts, like I mentioned, for example, group formation in our final year group projects, as well as obviously when they reflect on those, anything reflective for a student who has an understanding of strengths should bring in strengths, because that oftentimes that will help them explain their approach to particular scenarios and their learning there.
Very good. Just any final questions from our audience here today? Thank you everybody for sticking with us. As I said, this was a little longer than usual. We went to an hour and a half because of the wonderful content. Yeah, just to give it justice. Did somebody put up their hand there? Yeah.
Yeah, that was my hand up there. John, I was just wondering, in terms of, at Ulster University here, for example, we have the Edge Award, and Liverpool have the World of Work Award, and Queen's have the Careers Award, for participation in extracurricular activities. For those that completed it in the non-assessed way, did it contribute towards any sort of external, or in addition, in terms of their higher education achievement record? Was it
yes
logged as
in
part
fact,
of that?
There's two sides to that. So yes, we call our program RISE, and they gather RISE points for co-curricular and extracurricular activities. 300 is the magic number, because once they hit that, they can write a reflective portfolio and exchange it for credit. The other side of that, incidentally, is something we've really noticed this year, perhaps because we're just getting a little bit better at this each year. Our current first years have accrued nearly half the RISE points in the university beyond what they have to do with strengths, but from the point that they understand strengths. Those reflections where they're saying, I'm going to do a RISE activity, or I'm going to do a LinkedIn Learning that's going to get me right, and I'm going to go to this activity, this employer panel or whatever, where they're going to get those points. They've realised how important that is and how enjoyable it is as well, and that's kind of just accelerated all of that.
Very interesting. So that you feel has come out of the back of doing the strengths-based profile, and then where they've become more articulate and developed an understanding of the necessity to participate in those extra and co-curricular activities in relation to developing the employability skills. Brilliant, excellent. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
But it's almost like a pathway for the students to engage with those and give them a purpose, you know, to engage with their strengths, and the common language is so important. So thank you so much to everyone for your time here this afternoon. It's just gone over the hour and a half. I'd like to thank everyone for their support. This has been a while to bring this session together. So thank you, everybody. Our wonderful speakers, with James and Trudy at the start, with Bridie from ATU, and of course John and AB here on their wonderful implementation of strengths at scale, because that is so impressive. We would aspire to something similar at some point in the future. So we will be hopefully continuing conversations. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for our audience and their questions. It really, you know, brings a wonderful, I suppose, part from my own personal perspective. To see so many people join us today is just a validation of the work we're doing in our community of practice here as part of the AHECS Association. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you to Deirdre, of course, who's the main driver of this community of practice. We have a catch-up in a few weeks' time. I think the date has been put in by Deirdre at the outset there in the chat. So everybody's welcome to join and to contribute. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye.